dear Bagginses and Buffins.
By the blood of our people, are your lands kept safe?
I see in your eyes the same fear that will take the heart of me.
So do all who live to see such times.
By all that you hold dear, this good earth.
There's some good in this earth, and it's worth fighting.
Welcome back, everyone, and surprising no one, Warner Brothers thinks they need a ton more Lord of the Rings content. Some of you are going to be really happy with this, and others might be upset, since, the reason they're doing this is money. So, I guess the first thing, I know you like just having more content for the things you like to watch. So you're one of the people I believe is on the side of this is a positive, that despite why Warner Brothers might be doing it.
Yeah, maybe we can have the Amazon crank out the content crap, and the Warner Brothers can focus on like the rarely given out champagnes or.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess the way, I think people are looking to a combination of Marvel and Star Wars as the blueprint in how you would release a combination of movies and shows, right? So like with Star Wars, you have your big movies, and then you have a collection of shows, both animated or live action.
And then you have books and comics.
And then you have the books and comics. You won't have that with Lord of the Rings.
Even the video games in Star Wars are considered part of the canon. So you need to play the video. If you want to get the full picture, you have to be playing video games, reading books, and
Wow.
watching all these TV shows.
Wow, Lucas Films or whatever, they really knew what they were doing with making money. All right, let's make sure that everything we put out is canon, which means you have to get it. If you don't get it, you don't know what's going on, and you're not even a real fan. It kind of reminds me of Pokemon, where the theme song is "You gotta catch them all."
Yeah,
that's just how you make money. If you just said you only need one, then no money. But if everyone needs to own all the Pokemon, then there's just going to be nonstop sales happening. But getting back to Lord of the Rings, so this article also talks about Harry Potter and DC a little bit, and the Harry Potter show, from my own viewing of social media, has been largely negative. There are some people who begrudgingly will watch it in a similar fashion to how some people begrudgingly watch The Rings of Power. So there are those people in the Harry Potter fan space, but then there's a lot of people who are upset and saying it's too soon, to retell the exact same story of the movies and of the books. We're not that far out. Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, they're still pretty popular in movies themselves these days. It's a little too soon to just tap back into the same story. At least with Lord of the Rings, Warner Brothers has said they're not looking at remaking the original trilogy or The Hobbit. They're more interested in other stories set in Middle Earth. So I view that as a positive, because I know it's 20 years out, but I still feel like the original trilogy holds up. And so if somebody is into Lord of the Rings, if someone starts watching The Rings of Power and they do enjoy it, there's The Hobbit and the original trilogy still for them to.
Yeah, will there ever be a time where we look at the Lord of the Rings movies and say that looks dated?
I don't know. I don't think so. Unless CGI gets to the point where it's so immersive that when you look at a movie,
Like maybe the wargs and the eagles won't look so good anymore.
Yeah. For example, this is going to be a fun little Easter egg for people. Next time you watch the Titanic movies, a lot of those overhead shots of the ship are CGI. And if you look closely at the people that are on the ship, it's bad CGI. Like it's bad computer
Okay.
graphics.
Well, I would say there's a little there's a CGI in Two Towers. There's an overhead shot of Helm's Deep, and I think it's when the wall is breached and the orcs are charging in and the elves are charging. There's an overhead CGI
Yeah.
shot, and that actually does look a little dated, I think.
I don't see that. Like I know I know the exact scene you're talking about. I in my head it doesn't look dated. I'm gonna have to take a closer look next time I'm watching because I thought, I mean, I guess you could say some of the CGI might look dated, but the battle as a whole of Helm's Deep
Oh yeah,
is
I'm talking to like about a 2 second clip, maybe
yeah.
less.
Like yeah, I guess for me it's like the entire
And as you're really squinting to look at it too, you're not gonna notice. Like I
well,
don't notice the bad CGI of the on the Titanic. I've never noticed
me neither. Until
that.
someone pointed it out. Someone said, "Hey, have you guys ever seen this? Because this is terrible CGI, and it's literally like they look like the little like me people from like the Nintendo Switch, and
Oh really?
like it's like these little bobbly headed like
Well, I'll
cartoon
take a look at
characters.
that.
So like the thing is, at the time you didn't notice it because you were just so amazed at watching the Titanic. Like you're seeing this ship at the time you didn't notice it, but now as things get so real looking, when you look back at some of these older films, yeah, there's something off about it. I to me, I think you're right. Maybe there's a few CGI scenes in each battle because I know there's a lot of CGI in these battles, more than people realize. I say I use CGI, but it's not always CGI. It can be other types of animated graphics. But regardless, there are non-real human components to these movies
But
that
could you just update those parts without
no,
redoing the whole film? You couldn't?
no, I don't trust people to do that anymore.
Okay.
Ever since Star Wars got updated
Oh
like
yeah, well,
50
that's a little
times,
different. Yeah.
like there's I don't even know what the original is anymore of Star Wars. That's how
Well, so you need there's no official release of the original anymore, unless it's an old VHS from the 90s.
yeah, and I have a VHS, and I think it's one of
I
the newer,
I
like the later VHSs, so it's not even the original.
Yeah, I think I do have some the original one somewhere, but I don't think I think there's some bootlegged DVD releases of the original cut you can get, but
What I will say is I will allow so like when they released the 4K versions of the original trilogy, and they had Peter Jackson come in with his editor, and they helped color correct certain scenes for when they blew them up to 4K. That to me is okay. But if you
right.
then said, "Hey, Peter, would you like to add some more CGI stuff going on?"
Yeah.
That's when I go, "No, no, no. I want the original."
I want a few more banthas in the background.
Right, we don't want that. I just want the color to look the way that Peter Jackson feels it should. So that will help mask some of the bad CGI as well, because sometimes that's the issue is that the the color they couldn't quite get the color palette right, especially you go really old movies like the coloring techniques weren't quite there. So there are elements that I'm willing to accept when they go to quote unquote reissue them or whatever, but I don't want them editing like one scene for the movie just to like because the director feels, oh, nowadays I could do it like this, and then have them do it. I like some of the old work that they've done. That's part of the reason I'm upset with the way Lucas handled it, was that he was almost viewing it as like, oh, if only I had the technology back then. I don't know if he realizes how amazing those movies are with the technology they had on hand in the late
Yeah.
70s. Like it's phenomenal. And that's what's amazing. I don't care that you don't have CGI'd aliens running around all the time. Like what you were able to accomplish is outstanding for 1977 or whatever. That's incredible. I don't need all this other stuff. So, um, Yeah, I think there's some authenticity that needs to be protected in when they do these reissues for the new type of technology and that kind of stuff. Um, but at some point, we're gonna have to talk about a remake of Lord of the Rings. I know this. Like, we're 20 years in now, and this thing is still super popular. You give it another 10 or 20 years, and they're not gonna care that the originals might still hold up. They're gonna want another
Someone's
crack at it.
someone's gonna want to try to make money on it, yeah.
Well,
And we'll
and
probably go see it, yeah.
of course we'd go see. I mean, what I'll be like 50 years old. I'll be there opening night. Of course, I might be crotchety about it and like, damn, these kids, they don't know what they're missing with the original trilogy. Of course we're gonna go see it. But my point is, I know at some point we're gonna have to deal with that. I'm hoping right now we don't. Like, I would rather. I'm not a big fan of like just endless content the way Star Wars is. I think you kind of like it because it gives you a little bit of everything. Um, I personally would rather uh, quality over quantity sometimes. And when it comes to Lord of the Rings, that's sort of what I would hope they would err on. Like, you look at Marvel, that's just quantity. They
Oh
don't
yeah.
they don't care. Like, I haven't even followed it since Thanos. I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on. Thanos was great, and then I haven't followed it since. And then Star Wars, I come in for the movies, and then I come in for a few of the show moments. So I watched Mandalorian season 1 and 2 and bits of 3. I've watched the first few episodes of Andor. I've watched some of the animated stuff with you, but I don't watch all. I haven't seen all of it, so I still need the movies to allow me to know what's going on without
Yeah.
having all that background stuff. But the background stuff is nice and extra stuff that might be fun for people. So I'm torn on how they should handle Lord of the Rings. I really am, because I can see people like yourself just loving the idea of having a bunch of stuff. Like, you could have one show about
I
elves,
think,
one.
I mean, yeah, this is the issue. Tolkien left a lot of stuff that you could work with, but you're not necessarily allowed to use it. That's also the issue.
That's so. This is the problem, and this is what they really need to sort out: is who owns what. There's still lawsuits to this day over who owns what and what Peter Jackson was allowed to show in those. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, just get all of it. Amazon, you have enough money, just get all of it, or Warner Brothers, whoever, and just be. You don't have to release everything. But now you don't have to worry about stuff. But to your point about Tolkien leaving a lot of room for creativity, he absolutely did. I see so many videos of people yelling at content for Lord of the Rings and saying, "Oh, it's not in keeping with Tolkien." Tolkien was really just building a foundation. I mean, you go through his letters, you go through his actual work. He loved he loved reading old fairy tales and old mythology about uh, England in particular, and the people that made up early England. But he wasn't trying to encompass everything in Lord of the Rings. This is just one grounding mythology. There can be a ton of other stories that branch off from these characters, and that's kind of how Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy books came about after Lord of the Rings. And the fact that people are so keen to just say no, it has to be pure Tolkien. I think that's a bit. I think that's a bit of a miss on terms of what Tolkien was trying to bring. Like, that's why like Dungeons and Dragons is so fun, and a lot of that has been built upon Tolkien's work. I think that's the way you go about building out more Lord of the Rings type content. You kind of have fun with it, in as long as you're keeping stuff that has already been established canonically. You try to keep it together, and that's why with me, with the Rings of Power and with the Hobbit, I still have some issues, because with the original trilogy, that's the groundwork. Everything still needs to make sense in the context of the original trilogy to me, and the Hobbit and Rings of Power have moments where they don't quite line up. So that's my only real issue. I know with Star Wars, they don't seem to care that much. They try to make it all line up, but they're not too concerned if like a character's killed off and then they want to bring them back. They don't really worry too much.
Yeah.
So
Well, like there's gonna be, I mean, turning to a Star Wars thing, but they've introduced time travel a bit into Star Wars, so there's ways to change the timeline and retcon stuff if they wanted. So
is it
could be
actually
an
time
interesting.
travel or is it alternate timelines that have no interaction with each other?
That's a good question.
Because like you know what I mean? Like you could have one version.
It is timelines, and you can modify the timeline by, yeah, I don't know how to explain it.
Oh, okay.
But they have this world between worlds thing, and all the and along this timeline there's within this world there's like a bunch of portals into like what they call shatter points, which is like key moments that change the course of history, and you can go into these particular spots and change stuff, and then you can change the whole timeline. I think that's
Okay. So my question to you is this, because you're a much bigger Star Wars fan than I am, and I don't think these are going to be in the movies, so I don't think I'm going to have to worry about them too much. But my question for you is this: does knowing all of that, like big scale sci-fi, almost magic in a way element, does it ever detract when you go down to like the ground level and find a, a simple character that has no interaction with the Force and these other magical aspects of Star Wars? Does it ever like feel weird going from big scale, multiple timeline, force pulling ships out of the sky down to like some random guy in a town somewhere and like what his life is like? Because his life is so minuscule and insignificant to the greater mega cosmos timeline galaxy stuff. You know what I mean? And that's always my worry with some of the sci-fi um, movies is that they sometimes forget about the actual people living within the world. They're just trying to build out this amazing technologically advanced empire, and they forget that like it's built upon these people or aliens or whatever they are, and you sometimes lose like the true character of the common people, and you just focus on like Anakin and him becoming Darth Vader and having all this power, and you lose like the humbling nature of someone living in the empire. Does that make sense? Do you ever feel that
well, no,
element?
I mean, I think that's why Andor felt different because it kind of was more about just a regular guy.
Right, and so Andor had a bit of a mixed bag of a review, right? Like
Yeah.
some people thought it was the best Star Wars thing that's ever happened because it was so grounded, and others felt this isn't even Star Wars. This could just be anything. Like you could have just called this, Earth 33,000 or
Yeah.
something like that, and like you wouldn't even know that you're in Star Wars. So that's always my worry with some of this stuff, and I actually think Lord of the Rings does a great job of still finding ways to focus on the simple things, and that's why the hobbits are so key to all this. People completely underlook the hobbits and what they bring to the story, because if you take out the hobbits, the Fellowship is made up of some amazingly powerful people and elves and an elf and a dwarf, and you could kind of get lost in that. So allowing the hobbits to always bring it back down to like how it affects the Shire, how it affects them. People don't realize how important that is to this overall narrative of the Lord of the Rings, and I think that's something that the Rings of Power is also kind of missing, despite having aspects that could work with that. They don't really utilize it. So like we don't really see the only time we see common people is with the Harfoots. Everyone else we are dealing with like the top of their social hierarchy.
I regret to announce this is the end. I bid you all a very fond farewell.